We are back with you after an early first break and a short break. We may, since there's still 2 hours left, we may take another break in about an hour. And this class will be accompanied with then 2 intermissions. You'll see how the teachings flow, just like this flow we're talking about of Buddhism through these different countries, and how it's important to, in order to understand the higher axioms, especially the non-dual axioms that Zen Buddhism and Advaita Vedanta are so adept at giving out, transmission it's called, that it has to be based upon this foundation of principles. So we were looking through these esoteric and exoteric forms of precepts called Jujukai in Japanese Zen. And we had taken the first 4, which were never taking life, which is like yoga, ahimsa, and never engaging in stealing, which is like asteya in yoga, and never being unchaste, which is like brahmacharya in yoga, and now never speaking falsehoods, which is like satcham in yoga. So you can see how these, long before Zen, back in Lord Buddha's time, these were important precepts to living a dharmic life, and then how the father of yoga also probably made his choice of the 5 yamas and 5 niyamas based upon a lot of these earlier seers like Lord Buddha. I could probably, just as an aside right now, but an important aside, saying that the 5 niyamas in yoga include swadhyaya, which is study and memorization of scriptures, and worshiping God with form, Ishvara Pranidhana it's called, Ishvara Pranidhana, and tapas, austerity, which is very Buddhist too, very much like the early Hinayana path. And then of course there's 2 others, but those 3 particularly have come to be known as Kriya Yoga. The original Kriya Yoga was Patanjali's 3 niyamas of Swadhyaya, Ishvara Pranidhana, and tapas. So when Father of Yoga wanted to make an 8-limb system, and you can see how close that comes to the Eightfold Path, right, of Buddhism. You can see that these Indian seers were always on each other's page, and each other's minds too. You would not worship the previous seers and masters of these earlier systems, and you would also try and express them in your own day and age, but it was one stream. It was always seen as one stream. That's why that idea of 52 generations of Buddhism going from India to Japan is a very important one, and finally coming full circle to the West Coast, with Mayazumi Roshi and Yasutani Roshi and others, and then how that eventually then went back across the United States to the parliament religions, and there was Swami Vivekananda in 1893 coming the other direction, you see. So I've always looked at that as these 2 arms of India working their way over time, as if time were not an obstacle, and coming together right there in Chicago in 1893, and bringing all of these wonderful teachings of this one eternal Sanatana Dharma, this one eternal religion, full circle into the West. And I've always thought of that in terms of Swami Vivekananda saying that the sun rises in the east, but it sets in the west. So he was saying that in accord with that kind of spread of Sanatana Dharma, Buddha Dharma, if you will, around the world, and coming together in this particular age, right here in the heart of Maya, or Mara, as Buddha would express it, here where spirituality is experiencing death and materialism has got its life, see? And that has to change in order for people to work their way out of suffering. And remember, pleasure is a kind of suffering. My teacher, Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj, would often say, and we were saying this morning over breakfast, that he would often stand on the podium and tell us that we were following the Bhoga Marg, path of enjoyment, and that wouldn't lead us anywhere. And he said, you need the Jnana Marg, path of knowledge, that I'm bringing you, this Dharma. So give up the Bhoga Marga as the end goal, path of Bhoga, enjoyment, and take up the path of Jnana, wisdom. And if he didn't quite understand that because of the strange words of Sanskrit or something, then he would say, oh, okay, well then let's put it this way. You need God vision, not television. Or he'd think of some way in order to say that. People would laugh, maybe a little nervously, because they probably were sitting watching too much TV. But to, again, take up some tapas, some austerity, would mean give up the TV, turn it off, go out, maybe spend some time with your children who are watching TV too. So, all of this has these connections to the current time where time is being whittled away adharmically. Adharmically can mean anything from purposefully evil, stealing and money, seeking money and so for the wrong reasons and so forth, to just being unaware, of time is wasting. Time's a wasting, It's going by and you're not making any forward progress in it. Or if you are, it might be a kind of spinning of your wheels and you're not really going anywhere. Or you're going somewhere, you're going nowhere faster, as we used to say, you see. Let's really get busy here and get to work, but actually we're spinning our wheels faster and we're going nowhere faster, as compared to going nowhere slower. That's tamas and rajas, right? Tamas is going nowhere slower and rajas is going nowhere faster. So these two gunas have to be counterbalanced with sattva, which is balance. It's equanimity or equipoise, which is very famous quality sought by the seers of both Vedanta and Yoga and Buddhism. They all value samatha, for instance, or call it sama and dhamma, or you could call it by different ways. Sthiti prajnasya, steady wisdom by Krishna, and so forth. So those kinds of things are very important. So these first 5 pretty much are like the 5 yamas of yoga, aren't they? We can see how Patanjali concurred with Lord Buddha that these were really basic, these were the first limbs of yoga. He put it as the first limb of yoga, yama and niyama, the first 2 limbs. And then finally you could sit, asana is the 3rd limb of yoga. So if you get these, then you can settle your body and settle your mind. But without them you're going to always have to be looking back on karma. So like you said in this quote that I selected from the Dhammapada, these 3 avenues are going to be cluttered with karmic repercussions, and you're not going to make swift, easy, smooth, substantial headway along the spiritual path. You'll run into these obstacles. Problem with that is not just running into the obstacle, it's that it might actually take you off the path, might force you off the path, or you may become convinced that the path isn't for you and you'll give it up. So those are real dangers in people's spiritual lives and paths. Swami Vivekananda used to call that straw on fire. The Americans really took to this Vedanta, but they're beginning to look like straw on fire. They flare up all interested and then they can't hold the flame, you see. And if you get an Englishman on your side, he'll hold it forever. Or an English woman, like some of Swamiji's women, disciples from England. But so, the England had this, they were the greatest, most dominating race in the world, bar none. They ruled more of the world than even the Romans did. So how did they do that? It's through this perseverance and this strength, this staying power. And yes, it might have been staying power in not quite the right way all the time, via violence and various things that weren't dharmic, but nonetheless, through it all, they ended up with this very deep root strength that when they heard a great teaching, they would stick with it and be able to follow it. So if they were given a higher ideal, they could immediately recognize it and then stick with it. But we were called straw on fire, you see, so we need to convince Swamiji all over that we're ready for this, you see. And from this quote that we read in the first half, or the first third, you might say, of our class today, we found out that he's of the opinion, or of the conclusion that Buddhism is just India, straight from the source. When these teachings are, so this is case in point. These are pretty much the 5 yamas of yoga, aren't they? Now 6 is never recounting the misdeeds of others. So here's the avenue of speech, right? You have to not decimate, and you have to not speak ill, backbiting, fault-finding, gossiping. I mean, there are good 5 or 6 words right there in English that if they don't convey you the idea, then I don't know what will. You just give up that kind of talk, because this is an avenue of speech. You know what this reminds me of Shankara, which was another 500 years after yoga, after Patanjali came forth with his teachings on these steps to yoga, or these steps to moksha, rather, you'd say moksha, liberation. And one of them was closing the gate of the mouth, silence. It was an early practice. You couldn't really make any forward progress until you became quiet. And that's with your mouth he's talking about. You don't speak, and you listen. So that was a popular way, even in Vedanta. So you have 500 years, or 600, 700 years before Christ, and then you have, another 700 years lapses to Patanjali, and then another 600 or 700 years goes by to get to Shankara, and they're all pretty much saying the same thing. That this mauna, or speech, silence and speech, whether you put it in terms of, problems that shouldn't have been there in the first place, or whether maybe you're already a person that doesn't criticize others and you just have to still yourself, be quiet and observe yoga. This is the first doorway to yoga, in other words, according to Patanjali. And he was commenting on the yoga darshana when he said that. And that's the beautiful thing, is that you have Patanjali, looking back on Lord Buddha's teachings and being influenced by them, but then splash ahead to father of Vedanta, contemporary Vedanta, Shankara. He's looking back on Patanjali's system and commenting on it. And this is official. This is written down in scripture. These are Shankara's original teachings on yoga. So he's commenting on another darshana, very, very important one. And Vedavyas did the same. The father of Vedanta in the earlier time did the same with yoga. He commented on them, on the sutras. They were so important. So all of this could be said to be very much influenced by Lord Buddha's teachings. A Lord Buddha that's not a part of Buddhism. It's a part of India. See, this is just one line. I mean, we've often said that if you put Abraham and Moses and Jesus and Muhammad in a row, you just see one line, one religion. Never should have been sundered apart. The reason why India has lasted so long and been so effective in its spiritual life and in its philosophy is that Tantra and Vedanta were never sundered apart. Tantra, Vedanta, Yoga, and Samkhya were like the mind, the heart, the body, and the energy. And the body was Samkhya, the energy was Yoga, and the heart was Tantra, and the mind was Vedanta. This is one being. And so never sundered apart in that way. Always, the seers were always looking at each other's systems and concurring with them. Or if they had some rub with it, they would take it apart and analyze it and talk about it, and that would get offered up. Or if they had an addition to it, they would make the addition without putting their name on it. This was very key too. They say anything in this system, that is being proposed by me in this age is all due to the seers of the past, and they will never take any credit themselves for it. So I revere the seers of the past. So these facts about the movement of religion in India, you can put that against the Middle Eastern kind of stream, and say that, but Abraham to Muhammad, with Moses and Jesus in the middle, are really one stream, and would have been nice if it had been more realized. Because, the Quran is talking about Jesus quite often. It's just like Moses didn't hate Jesus, so why are the Muslims fighting with the Christians? These beings all concur with each other along the lines of important spiritual points for your religious life in the world, which is not an easy thing for anyone. Muhammad had armies on 3 sides of his border. You're going to blame him for his scripture being a little bit violent? Well then, Look back to Sri Krishna's time and see him on the battlefield with Arjuna fighting the same forces, you see. So, admittedly, you're in a world that's constant flux and change, and that's really right at the point. There is a changeless reality that's transcendent of that, and you're not seeing it, you see. So get back to the basic precepts, because these are causing you karmas that are keeping you from seeing it. So you could never, how they say, underestimate these simple practices. In fact, these are what your children are going to be needing to learn if they've forgotten. If they come out of the womb and they're not already in possession of these are the things you're going to have to remind them of to get them back on track, especially in an age like this, which the Kali Yuga, they call it, you see, the age of darkness. In that respect, the word Kali means darkness, not Kali the mother. But you might need Kali the mother to take care of that darkness. So Ramakrishna used to say some people are causing a nuisance down by the lake, you see. And so they go down there and they post a sign, say, cause no nuisance. But they go on causing it anyway. So then they send for a deputy magistrate, and he comes and posts a sign, and all the nuisance stops. So you have to get someone worse, more powerful, to get rid of that evil, a more powerful evil to get rid of a lesser evil, then they'll respect it, you see. So this is what's going on all the time in the world, I have to make these inroads with these subtle spiritual powers. And in the case of your children or other family members, then you're going to have to take the risk and try and expose these teachings to them, get them back on track. What's there to lose at that point, right? And what's the alternative when you're looking to make a positive change in the world and all other conventional ways are not working, you see? So, number 7, never praising oneself and deprecating others. This is also along the road avenue of speech, right? Mm-hmm. You're using your speech in the wrong way by lauding yourself and then but deprecating others. It's not a way to head the row. I mean, that's how Milarepa put it in his song. He said, when you go amongst the Dharma teachers and the Dharma practitioners, never head the row. Take the least seat, give the highest seat to others, even if you're more learned. So, this is kind of a practice of humility that you take on purpose. It's on purpose humility, because pride goeth before a fall, right? So, and that's a Christian saying. So basically, if you have the good fortune of working your way into a group of Dharmic practitioners, which is very rare to find in the first place, but to speak of a good teacher that you can trust, then you're going to have to follow these precepts. And this is just the exoteric form of it, right? There are some people who will already have humility when they come and so they won't have to observe this. But this is just to check your hat at the door of the Dharma gathering, make sure you're on the right page in case there's any doubt. 8, never be selfish with time and money. So here he brings up wealth and its import. There are 2 or 3 references to that, like offering charity to spiritual teachers. And so on this side, if we jump the gun a little bit, these are important, and we often even sing about that sometimes. Namaja pane kyun chordiya Ramanam Napane kyun chordiya Rama Namaja pane kyun chordiya Krodana chora Jyotana chora Krodana chora Jyotana chora Sattavachane kyun chordiya Rama Namajapane kyun chordiya panne kyum chordiyaram. Namaja panne kyum chordiyaram. The voice I used to be in my youth, but these are very powerful sentiments that they expressed here about you flatter the millionaire, but you forget to praise the Lord of the universe. And so it's all about this preoccupation with money and wealth and wrong orientation. It's not like right livelihood, which is one of the Eightfold Path, Lord Buddha. Right livelihood is very important, and we were even saying at the break, in our premature break we just took, that Sri Ramakrishna used to say there are three ways in which money is used wrongly, and then there are three ways you should use your money properly. The three ways you use it wrongly, if you have money, is for doctors, because you're ill all the time because you're spending your money and overeating and so forth, so you're getting disease. You're not practicing the yamas, right? And then court cases. How much money people spend on court cases? I mean, he was saying this back in the 1800s, see, in India. So it wasn't just, we know in America how much exacerbated that situation is with courts and all, but even there, back there, you were seeing it, with the people. And third is, to quote him, evil children. Evil children. They really don't love you at all. They're just waiting for you to pass so they can get a hold of your money. And this is very much part of adharmic life. But several of the ways you can use your money right, use it for raising a dharmic family. Then money is okay, he said, Sri Ramakrishna. He said, if you use it to raise a dharmic family, then you've purified money of all its potential ills, and there are many of them. I often say that a rich person never quite gets rid of the impurity of having money. There always leaves some sort of coloration on their soul, having money, too much money. So you have to be very, very careful with that. And then giving to spiritual organizations. You see, that's very important. Support the teachers, support the organizations, because this is really the most important thing that you can give anyone, is the Dharma. You have to become, remember the 3 pillars of Zen? The first was a absolute 100% faith and belief in the teachings of the Buddha and the Dharma. So you have no doubt about that that's the best thing, the highest thing that you can give anyone. And Sri Krishna says that at the very end of the Gita. If you go all the way to the end of that wonderful scripture, in the very last slokas, you'll find him saying, that one does the best good to my children, who teaches the wisdom path. Does the best good. The best thing you can do is the jnana sacrifice. Jnana yagya, he calls it. So, realize how important that is, and on any level you're doing it, whether it's with your friend or your family or your sangha, then you begin to, as Milarepa says, impart the teachings. And maybe nobody will listen at first, but then you'll start to attract a few sincere souls, and that will grow. I mean, Ramakrishna order is one of the most grandest orders now. It's got the most followers in the world, the top 10 type of thing, But it started out as it's a dozen little young men, you see. And then a few more came, you see, and that was after the master had passed. So turned into this huge organization in an extremely short time. Didn't have to march with crusades across a country and over thousands of years, but just in a century, it's turned into this huge burgeoning spiritual organization that Vivekananda split nicely into the Mat and the Mission. Those who renounced the world and were through with works, and those who renounced the world and were not through with works. You could put it that way. They still wanted to serve God and humanity, and therefore learn that art. So all of this in accord with how money can be an ally or an enemy to you, in personally, individually, and all the way up to these spiritual organizations. If you have an organization the way Swamiji set his up, that the monks don't own anything because they've renounced the world, they don't have any money, they don't have a bank account, they don't have children, they don't have land, they certainly don't have evil children. So all of that's taken out of the picture and nobody owns anything. Then you've got a workforce that can really be on the scene without the slightest ulterior motive or any other motivation than just to serve God and humanity. And a government like India would come forward to them eventually and say, here we want to make you a part of the government, and no, don't attach any politics to our organization. Swami Vivekananda said once, anyone who attaches any political significance to my teachings, I say, save me from my friends. See, so he made it very clear that he wasn't going that route. So the Indian government wants to seize the success here, first wants to take it for themselves, then they're getting in the way of the Ramakrishna order, historically. Then all of a sudden they're giving them awards, humanitarian awards. Well, both is missing the point. These monks aren't out there to get awards or to be lauded for saving the world. You can't save the world. The world's going to hell in a handbasket every age. It's never been saved and it never will be saved. So why are they out there doing that? Is it just to make a difference to that one? Well, that might be part of it. Is it to purify their own karma by working? Yeah, that might be a part of it too. But the real thing is that they're serving God and humanity. They're not serving humanity. And that's a very important point. If you serve humanity as divine, then they get all puffed up. But if you serve the divine as the divine, you see, the divine in the human, then they begin to think, well, maybe I am divine. Maybe I should realize that. And then they're ready for the teachings, you see. But the teachings are going to be based upon these precepts. I mean, the Buddhist precepts are very famous. I've gone into prisons and taught a lot, as some of you know, and taught for years, and then one of my students in prison will come up and say, I'm going to take the Buddhist precepts. And I said, great, do that. That's good. That's India. I'm not telling you to be a Vedantist and not a Buddhist. Those words aren't different. They're not dissimilar. They're not dissimilar paths. Take the Buddhist precepts and tell me how it goes, you see, but follow them. So the precepts are the first things you get. Just like if you're going to be a yogi or a yogini, you get the yamas and niyamas. But in the West, we didn't. We got hatha yoga. See, we just bypassed the first two limbs of yoga. And it's been to our worse condition that we've done so. So much so that yoga isn't even heard of anymore. Hatha has replaced the word yoga. And that's not acceptable. Certainly wouldn't be acceptable to the father of yoga, Patanjali, who left this 8-limb system behind, and you're somehow focusing in on the third only, and a little bit of the fourth, and you're calling that Ashtanga yoga? I don't think so. Ashtanga means 8. Learn your Sanskrit. And 8 limbs means you're ending with samadhi, and that's the whole reason you're doing it in the first place. To return to your true Buddha nature, if you want to put it that way, and go back to the earlier limbs and find out that that's it, you see. You practice the yamas and niyamas before you even sit like this, ideally. Because when you sit like this, the tantrasists and the yogis will both tell you, you split the spine open. If you're just sitting on a chair or something, probably no kundalini is going to start rising. Or its precursor called udgata. But if you sit like this, something happens. You may have noticed. That's why this tripod position is very, very much akin to yoga. And, it was there with the American Indians too. They sat like this. And they were great worshippers of nature and so forth. So basically this is a very important position, and it begins to open up channels that energy can rise through. Now, if it rises through those channels, and they're not made pure yet, then it's going to bring up impurities and I'm speaking the words of Ramakrishna here, is going to bring up impurities, like dancing and singing will bring up the kundalini, no doubt. Kirtan, so forth, he said. But he noticed that after these Hindu men danced and sang all night, and they got very high from that, then the kundalini came down overnight and they slept, and they woke up the next morning and they went and did heinous acts, you see, because it brought down impurities from these centers. It brought them up, and then the energy, yes, it did come up, but then these impurities that were at the centers came back down, and they went, and the next day they were nothing like the night before, you see, when they were in the peak of ecstasy. So there's purification that was missed in between. There were these steps between the upper and lower step that you didn't notice as you went up the staircase, you see, and came back down with this load of undesirable things with you. So purification, is sadhana. It's early sadhana, and it's based on these kinds of things. So I don't want to start giving a whole class retreat here on Tantra and Kundalini, but it's very important, and of course those are India too. And it's all part of this one ultimate darshan, this one ultimate view that's never needed to be split into different countries and so forth. It should be seen, as at its root and at its essence, and also in Zen at its very most maturing place, we see in Zen. Let's say the Japanese are much, much better suited to receive something like Zen than we are. See, they've had long periods of time with Chinese Zen. Chinese Zen came to them in 1100 BC, I think, Chan. So really Japanese Zen didn't start till much later, but the Chinese Zen came and got transplanted there. And Dogen Zenji and people like that, made sure that it was in good condition there. But the Japanese were an Oriental race with lots of worship in their genes and in their samskaras, and they were very balanced people. See, you bring the whole thing further to the West in this restless civilization that's warlike, then are we really ready for that kind of teaching? There's no doubt we need it. That's probably more important, but being ready, I'm saying, is to be qualified to receive something like Hatha Yoga and use it wisely, you see. I mean, basically Hatha Yoga to the Advaitas is what I'm doing right now, ekasana. There are hundreds and hundreds of postures you can do, but this is called ekasana, what I'm sitting in, one posture. See? That's what you need to end up with in order to get into samadhi, is one posture. You can't be meditating and breathing and doing all this and then saying your mind swells, suddenly telling you, well, I think I'll shift now. I think I'll shift now. Maybe I'll get into this other posture. That's asana vasana. You see? You know what I mean? Asana is a position, vasana is the desire. So now you have asana vasana, a desire to shift. See? What did Patanjali, the father of yoga, call that? Chanchala vritti, the desire to get up off of your seat when you're meditating. See? You're calling one of the great vrittis, one of the vibrations of the mind that's detrimental to your practice. So you can't be sitting there and thinking, gee, what position should I get into next? That's not going to give you samadhi. So, and if you practice it that way, pretty soon you don't just get asana vasana, but you get asana vasana samskara. You get an actual impression created in the mind around postures. When Advaita Vedanta and Zen Buddhism are telling you one position, you're not the body, and Brahman doesn't move, so why should you? And Buddha is saying, I'm going to sit here for 49 days under the bo tree and not move, so why should you? What about these teachings of the people who actually attain nirvana and attain samadhi, and there you are back there shifting, or having spent a lifetime creating a samskara, an impression in your mind about shifting, and you never were still once in your lifetime? Your breath never stopped in Kumbhaka? never caught in your throat? You never had this enlightenment moment that we were talking about last week in the teachings of Zen? This insight moment, you know? And you never qualified yourself to sit in front of the teacher and get inshin denshin, actually see his mind, get his mind transmitted to you, you know, like these Japanese practitioners did. Oh, you have to be ready for this when it comes to you. And the Westerners, still a question whether we are. Some of us, yes. But is this going to take over? Is Zen going to flourish? Is Vedanta going to flourish? Is the underground river going to come up and show itself? It remains to be seen, because we're not seeing a lot of it right now in accordance with the rest of the world. Never be selfish with time and money then. Never engaging in violence and aggression. This is the second time this occurs, right? Never taking life. But that can just be a mindfulness practice, right? See, there's that bug. Oh, I think maybe rather than step on it, I think I'll just put it out in the grass, you see. Or that animal's bothering me. I think I'll just, there's too many mice in my house. I think I'll catch them and release them in the forest. See, hopefully it won't come back for a few years. So whatever you need to do to not take life, that's just kind of a moral observance. But here is right down to the nitty-gritty of a warlike society. This is teaching that you should probably be studying Jainism or Buddhism to help you get rid of this horrible thing about killing and violence in you. It's because what goes around comes around, and so forth. So this death is going to come back to you. This use of guns, for instance, in the West is going to come back to you. Someone else is going to have a bigger gun or more guns or bigger bombs, and it's going to return in like kind. So probably should start showing compassion and empathy and practicing nonviolence right away. What I heard, and I think it's true, is that when 9/11 happened here, Dalai Lama sent President Bush a letter and saying, don't react to this with violence. And of course it wasn't heeded. It went after the perpetrators, right, and probably killed a lot of innocents on the way. But that was their way of doing things. War for war, and eye for eye, which Gandhi said makes the whole world blind. So that's just a way of doing things in a warlike society based on materialism and let's face it, greed. Asteya, never stealing and never taking others' goods, that's out the window. Of course we're going to take others' goods. We'll steal them if we have to, or we'll find some way to make it look right that we're stealing them. See, and so we've all seen that enough in the culture, and probably seen it in ourselves as we grew up, as kids and so forth, in a materialistic society like this. And you had to be taught otherwise. So you can see how everything begins to connect and mount towards a higher end when you do these basic practices. At first it seems like morality as opposed to immorality. But we know that wheel of morality and immorality has to somehow open, like Zen ox herding, which I hope we get to today. There has to be an opening in this circle, not just a closed circle. An opening in the circle that allows in, this move from morality and immorality to dharma. From thou shalt not kill to thou cannot kill. You have to take these teachings to a higher level. So this is the connections that are happening that allow you to do that. Pretty soon the dharma will open to you. And you can see that with the other side of this. Let's finish this column off with number 10, never slandering the three great ones. See, it reminds me of friends of ours here in Hawaii who wrote this. I take refuge in the Buddha, I take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha, O Bodhisattva, Bodhisattva. And they would sing this over and over again, get the Buddhist practitioners singing along with them. I take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, I take refuge in the Sangha. O Bodhisattva means the illumined one, the illumined teacher, the free soul. So that's the three great ones, or the three bodies of the Buddha, sometimes they call that, in the middle path. So to reverence these three, that is, would be the physical Buddha himself, and then his teachings, the Dharma. And that's Shakyamuni and the Dharma teachings. And then finally the followers, all the followers. And if you're looking at it from India to Japan, then that's a lot of followers. That's a lot of teachers. 52 generations of teachers, and then a lot of followers that got influenced by India's teachings through Buddhism over that long trail, see, all the way here to the West. So why not reverence them? They're the ones that deserve it. See, they deserve all praise. And that's how India would explain it. You know, I give all praise to my teacher for this. You know, and that's just a line of succession that just skips the ego quotient in it and just always pays everything back. You know, they say pay it forward. That's one of the sayings in the West, right? Well, let me explain to you the tenet of paying it back, paying it backwards. You know, that is, whether it's money or praise for receiving the Dharma teachings in your life, you're going to pay it back to your teacher. Guru Parampara. Sounds like horns, doesn't it? Parampara is like a brass fanfare. So it's really announcing the arrival of this idea that's long overdue, that, you know, I need to give all deference and pay all reverence to my teachers who brought me here. And of course that should include your parents who taught you these, or who brought you to your teacher. Sometimes friends bring you to your teacher. They don't stay around, but you do. So there's always connections being made. Let's look at the esoteric form. Maintaining Dharma. Always be a supporter of Dharma, never be its detractor. So you always support the Dharma. I would say that's true even if you don't follow the Dharma yourself. I know people like that who, well, you know, it's really not my lifetime, or it's not my time, I'm not really attracted, but I think it's great, I'll support it. I know people like that. And so they'll send money, or they'll do some sort of service, you know, go to the ashram and garden, or cut the lawn, or whatever they can do to help, but they won't be necessarily seen around the classes and all of that. There's not really quite time for them to get that deep. Whatever karmas they have to satisfy first. But anyway, to maintain the Dharma on all levels would be extremely important. The first of the esoteric forms of Jujukai, never failing to seek enlightenment. So you want to take, like the 3 pillars of Zen, you want to have that strong faith in the Buddha, or in the teachings of your guru, your preceptor, your acharya, however you want to call that, and take a vow, you know, to, like a bodhisattva. The bodhisattvas went through went through all of their teachings and arrived at the 10 higher lands. You can look at that next, in case if you want. These 10 pure lands of the bodhisattvas are attained in 10 stages, and they even have them mapped out. And your Buddha successor, your teacher, will tell you if you've reached there or not. Have I reached the 10th land yet? No. You're still back in the 4th. Oh, darn. Well, you're enlightened, so it doesn't really matter. But you are working on deeper and deeper phases of your enlightenment. My favorite is actually, I think, around the 8th or 9th land, you have to give up being a Buddhist. You have to quit calling yourself a Buddhist, because you won't be able to help the Christians and the Muslims and if you come at them with Buddhism. So you've reached such a stage of open-mindedness, like, again, this open circle in Zen, where you become like our founder, like Sixen was. You know, they practiced 4 or 5 different religions, I hold joint citizenship in 4 different religious traditions of the world, he once said to us. So he can assume that seat and that position. He can move marvelously like his master, Sri Ramakrishna, could between these different traditions and give teachings to where they're needed. So you don't want to stay in one darshana necessarily if the people you're talking to don't have any relation to that. It's not going to really help them. You might help expose them to something new if that's right, but basically they really need something deep to help them in a certain situation, then you're going to want to be able to shift. And you want to shift gracefully. That's actually Mahamudra teaching in Tibetan Buddhism. When consciousness shifts, shift gracefully. That's what they say in Mahamudra. So, the Great Seal, they call it. One of the best teachings of Tibetan Buddhism. So, all of this around this, never failing to seek enlightenment, and learning how to share the teachings first, and then eventually maybe even transmit them. See, that's a different thing, sharing and transmitting. Sharing, teaching, and transmitting are 3 different things, really. And that inshin denshin in Japanese, from mind to mind. Only Mahakashyapa got that from the Buddha on Vulture Peak. Buddha picked a flower up, twirled it, and smiled. See? That was because Lord Brahma had taken a body on Vulture Peak and came and asked Lord Buddha to teach him the Dharma. He said, "Would you please teach the Dharma now? I'm here." Lord Brahma of the Hindu pantheon. See, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, the Trinity, he actually took a body on Vulture Peak and asked Lord Buddha, this is a story out of the tradition, "Will you teach the Dharma?" And Buddha picked up a flower and smiled and twirled it. You cannot get what I want to teach through the words, through the Dharma. You have to get it mind to mind. And it's interesting because Vivekananda came later and said, you can never get enlightenment from books or temples. You can only get it from another soul. That's one of Swami Vivekananda's famous quotes. You can never get it from anywhere else. You have to get it from another soul. You get your torch lit from that soul. And this is kind of a proving ground for that. I mean, you get it 10 times from another soul. The 10 pure lands, you have to qualify yourself like the stairway to heaven. Only this heaven is with a capital H. So this is like full enlightenment as compared to just the death of ignorance. It'd be nice to have the death of ignorance. At least you have that. So now you're, you can say, yes, if the death of ignorance is enlightenment, then I have it. You see, I have the Dharma with me now, and I can transmit it. And you transmit it at different levels of ability. You see, so you're going to have to grow as a teacher, you might say. Not just grow as a student, but grow as a teacher too. So, never failing to seek enlightenment has all these facets to it. Number 3, coveting nothing and being generous. It's right across the board from never stealing or being unfaithful. So, what you want is, it has to do again with money and goods on one level, but here it's in a more esoteric form that you actually learn to give. Not just not steal. And so I've got enough, so I'm fine. But you actually, I could share some of this with someone else, you see, and do good that way. So if you had a lot of money, very few rich people think that way. They think I've gotten rich because I've kept my money, not spent it, But there were people in Sri Ramakrishna's life, for instance. He used to say, Mother Kali came to me early and said there'll be 3 people who'll supply you with everything you need in your life. And he showed them these people. One was Babaram Bose, and Matur Babu, who managed the stores at the Kali temple. So he would get everything he needed. So he didn't own anything, and he didn't have a house and children and all that, but everything was supplied to him as he needed it. So there are some people, is what I'm saying, who have sitting on these huge amounts of wealth, and they're doing so not because they like wealth, they're doing so because they like to give wealth to others. They say in yoga, you practice asceticism and so forth, and non-acquisition of things, non-acquisition of goods, right? But things pile up anyway because you don't want them. Things only really come to you when you give up desire for them. It's just kind of a hidden secret, right? So you accumulate all this stuff and it's back there, and you're sattvic and you don't really care. See? You just want God realization. You just want enlightenment, right? Seeking enlightenment. But then you find out how beautiful it is to give all this away. So the right time comes, you say, oh, I'll give that there and I'll give that there. And then all of a sudden you're sitting on this crossroads of wealth, giving out all this wealth to good causes. See? And that's a dharmic rich person. I've known a few of those in my life. And so in that case, money doesn't stain. You see, it becomes a very good dharmic tool for helping others and for spreading the Dharma. So being generous is more to the point there. Now, always show compassion. So that gets more into the heart, more into the bhakti path. So you can see that Zen here has, Buddhist teachings have this great heart to them. Probably that's the one word that you would associate bhakti with in Buddhism, because you don't see a lot of pujas or worship or even veneration of the Lord Buddha's body itself. If you see Buddha on the road, kill him, that kind of thing, you see, because he's not his body. So they're not really into the worship of forms of any kind, even the highest forms. But the one word that you can assign to Buddhism that you hear most often is compassion. Buddha was compassionate to all beings. Seeing a hawk jump at a rabbit, and he tore off some of his own flesh and fed it to the hawk. So he was always had this idea about helping others, being compassionate for their suffering. So that's really the bhakti path in Buddhism, the love path, compassion. And you'll see it in many cases in Lord Buddha's life, that was instanced. Never denigrating the dharmic teachings. Of course, you want to be a supporter of the Dharma. That was set up above. Maintain the Dharma, number one. But you should never fall into such a state where you would be talking down on the Dharma. You're always supporting it, giving it to others. Because if you want to seek enlightenment, then you want to also be able to share it with others. Always remaining unattached. That's one of the 32 points of the immortal Dharma given by Krishna to Arjuna in the Gita. Always remain unconcerned or unattached. Or sometimes he puts it, be content with anything that happens. Doesn't matter what it is. Somebody can win the lottery, 100,000 people could die in a tidal wave. Be content with them both. See? You become that even-minded and that equal vision. This, one of Vivekananda's very favorite qualities, samadarshitvam, equal vision. He loved like that the best, seeing the same in everything. So that's going to require you to be the same, be yourself all the time, and not shift to other perspectives or other positions. You want to have that's Shiva Mudra, right? And Shiva goes like this, that means just utter stability, unmovingness. And the yoni and the lingam, as it were, it's just, that's the coming together of the two most powerful forces, consciousness and dynamic Shakti. And that's going to make you immovable. And in that way, it's going to be another way of saying detachment or discrimination or discernment would be another way to put it in English. Not very many words for it. Renunciation, those three, detachment, discernment, renunciation, are kind of the words that are used for this unattached position that you must assume. and realize. Keeping free of false views. That was huge in Father of Yogas. He has this teaching called the 9 vikshepas, or sometimes antaryayas they're called, obstacles. And there's three that are physical and 4 that are mental and 2 that are spiritual, but there's one that's intellectual, and that's false seeing. In the Buddha's Eightfold Path, right orientation would be the way to say it. If you don't have right orientation and you go to a teacher, then you may intensify your spiritual practice, but you haven't started out with the clarity that's necessary. So you're intensifying unclarity. It's not a good thing, and it's a common mistake at the intellectual level. You're doing sadhana and you're intensifying your practices and you're doing these austerities like you're supposed to do, but your mind isn't clear yet. It's sort of like those people dancing and singing, right? The kundalini comes up, but the centers aren't pure yet. So they're bringing impurities up and they're going to come back down into their life the next day. So on the intellectual level, this is a very powerful jujukai. It's a very powerful form of spiritual practice, put in a very straightforward way here. Just keep free of false views. False perceptions. In Sanskrit that would be bhranti, darshana. Darshana means to see, and bhranti means deluded thinking. So you must keep free of deluded thinking. And Patanjali means it more on a philosophical level. If you don't have your ducks in a row philosophically, then you hear all these teachings and you can really go afoul of the Dharma. You can gather premature conclusions that are not right. You don't know how to come to the proper conclusion. Siddhanta, it's called. Vedanta Siddhanta Nirukti Resha. Brahmaiva Jivaham Sakalam Jikadcha. Akanda Rupa Sthitireva Moksho. Brahmadvitiye Shrutayaha Pramanam. That means it is the final conclusion of the Vedanta that all is Brahman. Time, space, living beings in the world. Living in constant recognition of this fact is called enlightenment. So there's a magazine out there is asking, what is enlightenment? Well, Shankara answered that question back in 700 AD in the Vivekachudamani with that quote. It's living in constant recognition of the fact that all this is Brahman. Time, space, living beings in the world, all Brahman. But you can't just see that once and then fall out of it. The Advaita Vedanta truth is the hardest thing to hold on to. It's the simplest of all teachings, but it's the hardest thing for the mind to hold on to. It's very much of a conundrum in that way. That's why people practice to get satori, in Zen. Satori is one of the words of 5 words that, describes that highest experience that they're waiting for. They're trying to get that experience and just setting their mind up for that over years with practice, sitting in zazen and various things, so that when that comes to them, it'll be like a lightning bolt in a dark room. So this has all to do with that kind of preparing your mind, qualifying yourself by stages, preparing for that. Now, encouraging others towards enlightenment, and that could almost be put with number 2 in a similar teaching. And if we look at these, we'll take a quick break here in a minute. We'll look at these afterwards, these 10 pure lands, because a lot of these are pointing towards that. Explaining Hinayana and Mahayana. Well, there's the names for the lesser vehicle and the greater vehicle. What also came along is the Vajrayana, that's Tibetan Buddhism. So there are different paths or vehicles that Buddhism was carried to these different countries through, and basically there are four, but these are two of them right here, the lesser vehicle and the greater vehicle. You had Madhyamaka schools coming out and just with these amazing teachings on the 32 limbs of enlightenment in the greater vehicle that just took the Buddhist teachings and showed how Indian they were, how philosophical they were, how thick they were, how many-tiered they were. I mean, the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path is just the tip of the iceberg kind of thing. And then you get into all the ramifications of these Dharma teachings and how deep they go. And it was just very much like, ever since Lord Vashishta onward, there's these great seers that were giving these multi-tiered, multifaceted teachings. And so much so that most of humanity couldn't keep up with it, couldn't keep step with it. And so we're looking back to periods like that, to Nagarjuna, and trying to understand how he explained the middle path in the Madhyamaka school, and how he was, I mean, they try to compare him with Shankara and Gaudapada, when they should be just saying these were souls that were speaking the same truth, and didn't think of themselves as being members of a different religion. Why are you comparing them? They're just speaking the same truths through their own particular language in their own different age, and therefore give up these tendencies towards denigrating the Dharma or for speaking untruth. I mean, you can fall into these modes of competition in philosophy, and the best examples of that, Western philosophy. They argue and they debate for money. Where's the conclusion? I mean, Kant and Hegel, you can go and study them, and they're many-tiered. You can hardly understand what they're saying half the time. See, but where's the conclusion? So the idea around this is that there must be a profound Vedanta Siddhanta. There must be a conclusion. The conclusion of the Vedanta is that all this is Brahman. And if it might be a bit too simplistic for most people, then they walk off saying, okay, it's all God. But no, we're not saying that the tree is God and the couch is God and the human being is God. We're saying that God isn't a form. That's where you're going to have your discrimination in place and some of these tenets in place, so that you won't go off half-cocked and make a premature conclusion and a mismatch out of the Advaita Vedanta philosophy or the Zen Buddhism philosophy. You have to know that Atman is in everything, but it's not a thing. Buddha nature permeates everywhere and everything, but it's not a space, and it's not in time, and it's not in cause and effect. It's not subject to cause and effect. So what part of that did you not understand, as they say, when we said all is Brahman? The simplest truths explained in the most profound ways. That's the great purpose and import of words. As we already heard, I said, I think a couple classes ago, that the Zen Roshis, Zen is usually known for silence and not so much wordage, right? But the Zen Roshis themselves say, if you can't explain your enlightenment in words, then you haven't had enlightenment. So you have to be able to explain it in words, all stages of it. So here the stages explain the Dharma to people, see? And don't just start with the middle path and forget the original Buddhism that came from India, because then you might be creating a problem, you see. You might overlook Buddha himself. You might overlook the Dhammapada, see. So it's all connected, and you have to explain it that way. Don't explain it like, just because it's called lesser, it means it's of lesser import. Without the lesser, the middle wouldn't have come along. How about explaining it that way, you see? Where would the middle be without the beginning, right? I mean, it's just pretty much common sense. You don't even need philosophy for that conclusion. Just make it yourself, see? Anyway, some of the strange ideas that get broadcast. And then finally we have this 10th, offering charity to spiritual teachers. And we've covered that pretty well. So here we want to take another 10-minute break and come back for the last part of the class. We're taking 2 breaks in this class for those of you who might have joined us late because of some resetting of equipment we had to do early on. So let's take 10 minutes here. We'll be back to finish up 45 minutes of this final class on Zen Buddhism. Thank you for your kind attentions, and we will see you in a few minutes. after our second break in this class, which we usually only have one, but this, for equipment purposes and resetting, we took this class in 3 segments. And I was letting you know that maybe we would look at the 10 Pure Land School, but it's not so much strict Zen Buddhism teaching, whereas the Zen ox herding really is. So I think we'll go with that. But those of you who are interested in the 10 Land School, I think I have given classes on it before that have included it. You can look back on our YouTube classes at SRV, and I'll also be teaching it more in the future. But let's put our attentions on the 10 stages of ox herding. Jugyu Nozu, it's called. Now, our own teacher, Lex Hickson, that is our main preceptor or first preceptor of SRV associations, had that beautiful book, Living Buddha Zen, which I very much encourage people to read. And the first quote here is out of that book. He says, and it's on this teaching of Zen ox herding, he says, "The ox symbolizes the intrinsic nature of consciousness, the mystery of what we are. The seeker of enlightenment must become as close an observer of consciousness as the Eskimo is of snow conditions." And that's a precious teaching in Buddhism too. So to survive in the Arctic, you're going to have to know about snow conditions and watch very carefully and observe and be detached and experiment and all these things which Zen is famous for. So in that way, we should be the same with our own consciousness. And that's also a very powerful teaching in Zen, in Advaita Vedanta, to observe your own consciousness. Who am I would be a classic way of saying that. So this is how it happens in 10 stages. I'm going to take this in the 40 minutes we have left. And it's all outlined here pretty much the way our preceptor put it down in Living Buddha Zen. First you have to seek the ox. So remember, if the ox, it represents your own pure conscious awareness, or timeless, deathless consciousness, however you want to put that. Chaitanya is a word for it in Sanskrit. This is your essential nature. Then you have to seek it. So there's awakening first. And these are traditional images here from Zen drawings, several line drawings. First you would awaken to it, and we all know about that if we're interested in spiritual life. Then you must formally seek. That's why when we went through this really forms a part of formal seeking, Jujukai, these tenets that you follow, and you'll hit a maze of pathways. So Zen isn't going to save you from any punches here, or pull any punches either. It's going to tell you exactly how it is. In fact, that's where the teachings of Wild Fox Zen and the thicket of tangled vines, they call teaching, that you hit these maze of paths in Zen. And we've seen that happen to people. They would get interested in spirituality and then get drawn in all different directions and not be able to find their way. There's this misdirection, so many misdirections in people, and so many poor choices going on. And we see that particularly amongst Westerners, who seem to be really lost, especially when it comes to spirituality. So you'll awaken and formally seek, but you'll hit this maze of pathways, and that will produce some exhilaration in you. That is, we all like variety. Remember, in Tantric Buddhism and in Tantra, variety is one of the 16 evolutes of Maya. It's called Vaichitra in Sanskrit. Vaichitra means distractions by all these different varieties. You get into all these different varieties and you forget the source from which they all came. It's a classic problem. So you get exhilaration, but then followed by desolation. See, it's like that straw on fire, isn't it? Burns up and then you don't have anything left. So you get depressed or unhappy or disillusioned with religion in this case. We see that happening to people. And then 5, the sense of hidden essence. It's as if, like Vivekananda said, you won't see the bed of corals and pearls and on the bottom of the ocean until the ocean sinks, you see. The wave, so at the wave you're exhilarated. It's like, oh, I can see for miles, right? But then the wave goes back down into a hollow, and you feel like you don't see anything. But if you looked in the right direction during that period of dissolution, you'd see this bed of coral and pearls that were completely obscured when you were on that high crest of the wave. So that's how it's described in both Zen and Vedanta. This sense of hidden essence comes to you. So what that tells you is the ox never really went astray in the first place. So the first step is the last, in a sense. But most people don't see that. They have to go through this process of finding their ox. It got lost. So it's sort of like the ox is still out in the shed, and you stick your head out one day and you say, my ox is gone, and you go running into the forest to look for it, and the ox is there all the time. Don't want to forget that. I mean, that's very non-dual teaching, that in Advaita Vedanta too, is that you never were divorced from your essential nature. You just thought you were, or you dreamed yourself away from it. There are various ways of expressing that. All right, finding the tracks. I need to keep myself on track here, so we say all of this in 40 minutes. You must track the ox then. Find the wisdom teachings is the first thing to do. If you're tracing your own consciousness, then essentially there's the Dharma, right? And you want to go to that first. You don't want to go to books and temples, vain thy search, Vivekananda said. You want to go find a teacher and the teachings. So that's finding the tracks of your own consciousness. They'll be listed in the revealed scriptures of the seers. Is how Advaita Vedanta would put it. That's Guru Anusashana and Vidya Shastra. Those are the first two of three great proofs of truth. Is basically Vidya Shastras. Vidya means wisdom, Shastra means scripture. And Guru Anusashana, a good teacher, and then finally Aparoksha Anubhuti, your own direct experience. So scriptures, teacher, your own experience. It's just put very nicely in Advaita Vedanta, which is just Zen Buddhism in another country. So following his own tracks, you'll find him by following his own tracks. Then fruitful illusion comes to you. Now, of course, this is very bare bones. In the book Living Buddha Zen Lexicon, we'll explain a little bit more what this means through some of the traditional ways of understanding it. But it's sort of like here you had desolation coming out of nowhere after exhilaration. Here you follow the tracks and find the teachings, and you have this sense of fruitful illusion. You might think that you're enlightened before you actually are. So you've sort of jumped the gun there. And in that, you see that the self seems evident to you, but maybe you're still attached to the ego self, you see. And but at that point, you will enter meditation. So this whole stage is epitomized here. Trampled grasses show signs of the ox's presence. So this whole stage, in all of its richness and all of its potential error and false exaltation and so forth, both stages really are all about just the ox's presence. That's all. You haven't actually found anything yet. You could even go to sleep that night in the jungle thinking, I found my ox, he's here. But it's not, you have to go further. So then you catch a glimpse of the ox in the third stage of ox seeking. See, that's initial experience comes to you. Not profound, conclusive experience, but initial experience comes from these teachings and this meditation. Teachings and meditation are very important. That's Dhyan and Gyan and Dhyan in our tradition. It sounds alike. Gyan, wisdom, Dhyan, meditation. There would be no more powerful combination of two yogas than that if you put the wisdom teachings together in your meditation. And unfortunately, some people are just meditating, that's all. You could sit for 8 hours in Zazen without any wisdom of the tradition, and you're just making it, your enlightenment experience, you're just dragging it out so long. Put a couple teachings in there and watch the sparks fly and the gas ignite. You see, So it's very important to put Dhyan together with Gyan, and I think the traditional Zen will concur with that. Enlightened but unawares of his enlightenment. Remember that 5 stages of enlightenment teaching we had 2 weeks ago on that beautiful chart we studied. How it went through 5 stages of enlightenment. And, that also plays in here if you want to look back on that. So look at this initial experience, enlightened but unaware, flashes of insight, and therefore you intensify your discipline. So you're getting traces, you're getting tastes. In other words, you're caught a glimpse of the ox. And it's really, now I can capture it. I can get myself back, and get him back to the shed. So I can bring him home. I can plow my fields. So there stands the ox in the jungle. How can he hide? It's impossible for an ox to hide in the jungle. It's not a jungle being. It's different colored than the other animals, and it's so huge that it's going to stand out anywhere you put it, you see, even in a river. So you've caught a glimpse, and there's no way that it can escape now. And that's, you've seen your own consciousness, and there's probably no going back from this 3rd stage. You've passed through most of the dangers, like occult powers in yoga and so forth. You can see the correlations there. Passed through most of the dangers. Straw and fire danger, all that we've been talking about. Now catch the ox. 4th stage. Sees its wild strength. You see, it doesn't want to be captured. You could explain that by saying people don't really want to realize their self. They just want to live in their ego. See, so you can try and entice them in various ways, but they much prefer ego and pleasure and conventional life, and the excitements, exhilarations of seeing your true nature and being transcendent. Oh no, I don't think so. I think I prefer, as Vivekananda said, my gray little study of a life. You see, my gray little study of a life. Vivekananda said that's what most people prefer. Go figure, right? Now, breaks that old habit, observes its original and observes the original mind, 2 and 3. So it gets rid of these old habits of, in this case, how would you call it? Rebellion. Let's see, false independence. Betraying itself. That rebellious nature, it'll break that habit. And it'll begin to toe the line, and it'll observe original mind that way. It'll, you can put together that with these experiences it's getting, these initial insights, and that's going to be like control of the mind. In yoga, that would be like the 5th limb, pratyahara. You'd actually get some concentration of mind, and that even sets you deeper on the path, with less risk of falling off. This ox is almost yours. And then you temper and refine the mind after that. You can't just leave it in an observation mode. You have to work on it, purify it. Hatha yoga and breathing exercises aren't going to be enough there, you see. You're going to have to actually consult the scriptures, say what the seers, hear what the seers said, and meditate on it, contemplate it inside of your mind. That's going to refine your awareness. And that will sustain your awareness as well. And you'll be able to harness the energy of enlightenment itself. You might say that's like psychic prana. I would think of psychic prana when that's mentioned. Vivekananda in the Raja Yoga commentary has that chapter called psychic prana. There's prana, and then there's psychic prana. Well, we didn't even know about the prana, in the West. He said that was missing when he came here. Man does not live by bread alone kind of teaching is missing. See, that there's something else that's causing you to live other than food. That's prana, But then to go to the psychic prana, that's a whole different, that's getting, to me, close to Shakti. That's getting close to the dynamic side of consciousness, which you haven't seen yet. You've just seen the mundane side of consciousness. So this is how I would think about this in my own tradition. That is my other traditions, Vedanta and yoga particularly. I would think about it that way. And the quote from the tradition, stubborn and unbridled, it still yearns for sweet grasses. So it's got to break its old habits and discriminate between these wild weeds and foliage that it's eating, and yearn for those sweet grasses, you see, and be willing to be captured. See, it's a little rebellious right now, and it needs to refine itself, if you want to put it in a nutshell. Now the sixth stage of taming the ox, it is taming the ox. Intimacy with your own consciousness will help. See, like the Tantra says, how does that put? Forgetting the exact words that it is, but it has to do with you're the darling of your own worship. See, that's the point. You're the darling of your own worship. You see, so you're worshiping outwards and images and gurus and this and that all the time. Really, you are the point of your own worship, and so that's what it reminds me of here. This intimacy. So you find out how precious you are amongst everything. In fact, without you, none of this would exist. Gurus, paths, religions, practice, it would all be nothing if it weren't for you, you see, with a capital Y. Maybe even with a small y. The ego is very important right now, and so is the intellect, and so is the mind. It's very important at this stage, Holy Mother says, to get you to Brahman. You cannot do without that mental complex. So that's very important. The mental complex is thought, intelligence, ego, and mind. That's the fourfold mental complex called antakarna, the inner cause of everything. You know, antakarna, inner cause. It says it right there. This is the mind made everything happen. And so this kind of intimacy is going to take you closer to that. And you can then observe your thoughts. You see, lovingly, let's say, because you've been observing your thoughts not so lovingly up to that point. See, I don't really like myself, and I don't like my thoughts. I've heard that said so much from people, especially teenagers. I don't really like what I think. Help me, you know. Well, that will ripen the ego. So right here we are with chitta and ahamkara, right? Thoughts and ego, two of those elements of the mind. Ramakrishna says, pakva and apakva hamkara. There's the ripe ego and there's the unripe ego. As long as there's an unripe ego, God stays far away from the picture. As soon as you ripen the ego, you know, right there, you're one with your Father. It's just almost merging. Now you attain to ordinariness. Now this is definitely a Zen teaching. You know, it's like they're keeping you away from already, even at the sixth stage or fifth stage here, keeping you away from this idea that I am great, I'm going to get enlightened. It says, you know, this is just what's called every man's consciousness. You're just going back to your true nature. There's nothing special about that in Zen, you know. You'll feel peaceful and blissful and great there, but it's not going to be sensational like some people imagine it. So they're trying to keep you away from that sensationalism. Mystery mongering, sensationalism, occult powers, these are all back here, you see. And all the great seers and avatars have mentioned them. From Krishna to Ramakrishna, they've warned against those things. Those are the bookends of India, really. Krishna and Ramakrishna right now, as far as we're concerned, are the bookends. Everything that came between was Vashishta and Buddha and Shankara and Gaudapada and Chaitanya. I mean, but if you look at those two bookends, they're both saying the same thing about sensationalism and mystery mongering. They're really, you know, difficult problems, impediments along the spiritual path that have cast many person off the path, taken them away from the path and into prakriti laya, you know, meddling with powers that they shouldn't be meddling with. So you're going to instead attain ordinariness, you know. I just feel myself again. You know, see, back to the self. And this self is refined. ripened right now. It's not like you're returning to the old ego that made you not like yourself, when you observe your thoughts. Now you do like those thoughts. They're running along the right trajectory. And then this releases primal awareness. This again reminds me of psychic prana, is that it connects with, to me, Divine Mother. Primal awareness is Shakti. This is the best way of thinking of the word primal. Primal could mean caveman. Primal can mean all sorts of things. But here in Sanskrit, primal awareness, Shakti, means the dynamic side of Brahman. You've reached this essence of right action, of power, Shakti power. It's so important to yoga, tantra, and non-dual darshanas like Zen and Advaita have not been able to overlook it, Shakti power, as much as they may have wanted to in some schools. They can't overlook the Divine Mother of the universe, and neither could Judaism, and Christianity managed it, but it's been there in all Eastern religions, because all religion is Eastern, whether it's middle, far, or near. Basically, Buddhism has shown them up. See. So anyway, that's the taming the ox. Now, you could say then, if you release primal awareness, then you're halfway through the 10 stages, aren't you? So 6 stages, riding the ox home, once you've tamed it. So first, illumination visits you. So not just an insight, but you actually feel like the self is enlightened. Well, how I would put that, and how I've explained it to other people who've asked me the question, is my ignorance died. And so with ignorance dies doubt about wisdom, and doubt about your path, and doubt about your teacher, and doubt about truth. It's just gone. You don't remember what it was like anymore. It's like you right now trying to remember what kindergarten was like. See, you just lost it. You grew past it and you went beyond it. So you can't remember what it was like to be ignorant, because these teachings of the Dharma have crowded ignorance out of your mind for good. Never visit it again. And with it went despair, with it went depression, and with it also went boredom. I mean, you could pretty much say, if you're never ever bored again, that you're rather in touch with primal awareness. And she's not going to bore you. See? So the least of the things you have to worry about with Mother Shakti is that you'll get bored. In fact, you'll probably have more than you can handle. You see, I mean, that's been evinced by many people who have awakened Kundalini. It's, well, this is too much, It's not like, oh, I'm bored. It's never ever said that about true awakening. So, good way of explaining it. Now, illumination visits, and then simplicity occurs. Sort of back to that idea of ordinariness, you see. So I would say, I wouldn't agree that truth is simple. I'd say it's simply profound. So when you say that, the truth has dharmic ramifications. If you hear the ring of truth, like say if you hear Om, you see, that would be the primal word. We're talking about primal things, right? In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So if you hear that word vibrating, humming like 1,000 bees in the very center of your consciousness, then it's simply profound. You're hearing the original Shabda Brahman. You're hearing the sound that comes off of God. See, you're at that chakra that has 2 petals. One's going in and one's coming back out. You see, and so you're seeing how everything works. And I better not linger too long on that, because we get into another Kundalini class. But that is a very profound level that's there in every tradition of India. You cannot sidestep Om, the word. Om Mani Padme Hum in Tibetan Buddhism, Om Namah Shivaya in Tantra, it just goes on and on. So that's a very important part of all of these darshanas, is that word. Now, then spontaneity dawns. So you might call that also omniscience visits the mind. Spontaneity means you can automatically connect with the meanings to things, the essences of things. And it doesn't take you any time to do that. It just occurs. It's like consciousness occurs, and it's occurring every second, every millisecond. And your mind gets in step with that. So that's spontaneity here at the 6th level of observing. It's not like, some sort of graceful art you learned in money making or something. Like, I'm spontaneous. I can be spontaneous. But this is in spiritual life. So it's very immediate. And of course it's accompanied by the queen of immediacy. You see, nothing's faster than Shakti. Faster than sound is light. Faster than light is thought. What's faster than thought? The mother of all thought, Saraswati, goddess of wisdom. She's the swiftest of all. Everyone has said so. Remember Sri Aurobindo's writings on the mother. There's nothing outstrips the mother. You can't even think of her without her already being there. So that kind of spontaneity is what we're describing here at this level. And that radiates realization. You can see how this really gets way past boring. Speak of boring, gets into, we hate to use the word, but it gets exciting. You see, none of the Zen Roshis or the Indian Swamis would want you to use that word. Once our very teachers used that word in the presence of Swami Nikhilananda. He said, "Lex, I never want you to use that word again." Well, I'm excited about that, Swami. I don't want you to use that word again, you see. So they're always on the watch for that kind of excitement that, could echo you back to some of these other things we just talked about. A little bit premature and thinking ahead too far, and excitement. Then the one who is riding the ox home becomes aware of subtle illusions. It reminds me of yoga too, how you'll have to go beyond the gunas. The gunas that happen at a very, very high level. When the gunas went out of equilibrium, creation began. When they went back into equilibrium, creation stopped. So it has very much to do with the word and these 3 gunas of nature, how that kicks in and form begins, and how it, form goes away when you've transcended them. Trigunatitananda, you've transcended the 3 gunas. So that's what it reminds me of as a sort of explanation for that. You become aware of the subtle illusion of this, probably the very finest parts of matter, like unmanifested nature, thoughts, and deeper thoughts, and almost beyond thought. You're almost ready to transcend the Trinity itself. There's a slokas in the Upanishads where one soul prays to Brahma, "Take away the sun." And Brahma says, "Why?" "Because that's hiding your real light." So, the real light is what's behind the billion suns. The billion suns are distracting, to an astronomer. Wow, It's a wow with a small w, But when you see the light that lit up the suns, which is a thought in God's mind, that's wow with a capital letter, you see. So, it's becoming aware of subtle illusions, sort of an example. And then you cognize separation. Oh, well, that's very yogic, basically it's kaivalya in yoga. Kaivalya means you realize the difference between yourself and nature. And it's like at the very last stage of yogic realization that you do that. You have to isolate yourself from nature. Both manifested and unmanifested nature. It's a very, very high state, kaivalya. Almost enlightened, fully enlightened, that is. And so you're going to have to give up nature because it's making forms, and that's one of the subtlest illusions you can overcome, is that I'm not a form. Imagine how many lifetimes you've lived as a form, and why you've come back so often to keep believing yourself as a form, why your ego's still there, why your body's so precious to you. Ramakrishna said more precious than anything else in the world is your body. So all those reasons are very stark realization it brings to you. So you cognize that, you see that oil and water are always separate, and you may mix them, nature and soul, that is, but it would take about 45 seconds for that to separate if we had the time to watch it. And when it does, you realize oil and water will never mix. So the teaching is consciousness and nature never really mix. They only have a relationship. That much you can give it. But your soul is not material. And this should be an obvious teaching. You ask children about it, they'll say, no, I'm not the body. And they haven't even got the teachings yet, you see. But we've done that often. So but adults, they say that, but it's sort of like a parrot mouthing the mantra. It's really not going very deep. To really know it, then you would reach separation. Or do we have the time here? We have 15 minutes. So that's interesting here that after you ride the ox home, you forget it. You just let it go in the yard again. So ox forgotten is the 7th step here. All is attained. You can see, remember the ox is your pure conscious awareness now, and you've got it back. So you went looking for it, you found it, you tamed it, you got it back. And now all is attained, so daily life is enlightenment. This is ordinary man's consciousness, this is simplicity, this is ordinariness. You see, inaction in your life. You just feel like you're living a dharmic life. Everything's in balance. And meditation is natural to you. Now that would be nice, wouldn't it? Speak about prayers you want to ask Divine Mother next time you see her. You say, oh, can I have just natural meditation all the time? Like Holy Mother said, does God exist only when you close your eyes in meditation and cease to exist when you open them? No, God exists all the time, whether eyes are open or shut. So this is what is being said here. It's a very good example of that. Natural meditation, you see God with eyes open or eyes closed. That's all there is. That is your Buddha nature. Sorry if I'm using words that, might put anyone off. You know what I mean. Then action is meditation. That's where the karma yoga, where the Gita comes in. That stultifying sloka that nobody can really understand for a long time is those who see action in inaction and inaction in action, they truly see. See, it's even hard to put it into English and have it make any sense. See, but this is the idea of, that a Zen Roshi walks across rice paper and doesn't leave a wrinkle. Or a bird flies through the sky and doesn't leave a trace. You see, that's that kind of action and inaction that's being enjoyed here, as it were. And 5th, there's infinite peace. Who wouldn't like that? And 6th, the bliss of two-ness. So that's an interesting insert in there for Zen Buddhism, is that you're really liking the relationship with you and the ox. And you probably don't want to give that up. You see, I don't think I want to become one with my ox, yet. So you're enjoying the relationship of the two-ness. And I didn't read when I look back here. Sorry, go back to 6 here. Astride the ox back, he gazes serenely at the clouds above. Okay, we didn't quite read that. That's in the stage of riding the ox home. Now to summate the ox forgotten here, the ox has now vanished and alone and serene sits the man. So he's one with his consciousness now. He's reaching that stage of not two-ness. That's a nice way of putting it in Zen. Then the ox and the self is forgotten, both. And this is where these 5 stages of enlightenment, look back on the earlier classes. We went through the 5 stages of enlightenment in Zen, very great teaching. So here, neither delusion nor holiness is there. So you don't think of yourself as enlightened or holy, and delusion isn't there, ignorance is gone. So you're living in this very, very indescribable state of oxyness. There's no oxymorons there, and no morons for sure. And you're always open to fullness. That's this. You're getting to this. And it's why Zen is so beautiful, because this is where the Zen masters end up. It's just simple one-line drawing to illustrate these. You're always open to fullness. Life is enlightenment, and all things emanate awareness. You think, it's like Ramana Maharshi or something. If you read about him or you were with him, I knew one of my old Vedanta teachers has actually gone to meet him and described him when he saw him. So he's just radiating enlightenment. Everything is, not just you, because you don't really think of you as different from everything else, right? Because you're always open to fullness, and you've forgotten yourself. The ox and the self are both forgotten. It's like you're back here, Sense of hidden essence is there. And you never were separate from it in the first place. This has all been a happy journey inside your own mind. The dream is your awakening from the dream, if you want. The dream that you yourself proposed to yourself and convinced yourself to dream. You see. So he lingers not in the Buddha and passes through the not Buddha. So that's classic Zen Buddhism. If you see the Buddha on the road, kill him, kind of stark statement. A way of saying in Zen that takes away both ends. Then, ninth, you return to the source. From formless back to form without change. That's an interesting way of putting it. You go back out of this state of just absolute oneness or not two-ness, and you bring it all back here, full circle. Full circle, see. Then, all is a circle of emptiness. Emptiness is being very precious to Zen Buddhism. It got less precious to the middle path because Shunyata wasn't quite enough. They knew there was something beyond emptiness. But Zen clung to that sense of emptiness and gave it a higher definition. So Shunyata probably paramount in Zen Buddhism. That emptiness, there's no compromising it to them. Life is manifestation of source. A nice way of putting it. You struggle for words, but Lex Hickson did a very good job. He's a master of English language, our teacher, so he did a very good job of putting these Zen teachings that came from Sanskrit to Chinese to Japanese back into English, see, so that it comes full circle, like this has, or is coming full circle. And so there you have this. Life is just a manifestation from the source, or of the source. And probably without moving, so without any action going on. Action and inaction, like Swamiji said, coming and going is all pure nonsense. Of anything, any kind of change, any kind of transformation is nonsense. Brahman doesn't change. Buddha nature doesn't change. Busho here. So, humans gone, only transhuman flavor remains. Very hard, of course, to put that into English, but that's how he put it. Humans are gone, but only transhuman flavor remains. You would say that when you see all of the thing as manifestation from the source, people also are included in that. Because people are obviously different than objects. Their bodies are objects, and you assign maybe too much importance to them, and to your own too. But now you're just seeing them as wafts of incense smoke, you see, that came from some source somewhere. And it's non-different. Actually, it's carrying bliss with it. It's carrying scent of bliss with it, you see. Hard to describe, but did this best. So the quote there in the tradition, and these are, taken from the book, Living Buddha Zen, and these are actually how the Zen Buddhists would put it into English. The quote there is, "Seated in his hut, bridle and whip lying idle, he hankers not for the things outside." He's found his consciousness, he's dwelling in it. And he doesn't need the bridle and whips or any of those accoutrements anymore. His practice would be the whip, The bridle would be the Dharma, maybe, Now, entering the marketplace with helping hands. So beautiful. It's very Taoist. You can see how Taoism influenced Buddhism and Buddhism influenced Taoism when it went through China. And picked up the flavor of each other. Just like Tibetan Buddhism picked up some of the Bon religion as it passed through Tibet. You got the Buddha fields and all this color and tonkas and everything. But this kind of flavoring is very beautiful. Perfect emptiness in action transforms poison to nectar, and stripped of powers causes all to bloom with highest potential, would be the three entries there under entering the marketplace with helping hands. You probably wouldn't even see it as a marketplace. It was just a way of saying or speaking. So that you would just see Buddha nature in everything, and you'd just be open to it, as it's said here, and see it as manifestation from source, and then you couldn't even call it helping, see? Or hands. It begins to open here, you see. So the gate of the hut is closed, and even the wise cannot find him anymore. See? So like death, yama, and karma all went looking for the realized soul, and they couldn't find him, the song says in India. Death can't find him, karma can't find him, yama can't find him. He doesn't exist anymore as an individual self, separate from Brahman, or separate from Buddha nature. Ways of saying that very beautiful. So thank you for taking a 45-minute jaunt through the 10 stages of ox herding here. And before we end, I want to read a few koans, because people wanted some silence. And I kept meaning to do this, so we're going to take an extra 5 minutes here. And these koans, these haiku are written by my own students after a 3-day Zen retreat. And you'll see how they felt with the Zen flavor in them. And I'll just read a few of them. We had a good 16 people at that retreat, and they each had to write a haiku. But this is how they ended up. A few of them got expressed. So I'm not going to say anything after this. I'm not going to end with a Sanskrit chant. This will be the final class of this 5th class of the series in Zen Buddhism. We'll just end with these haikus, then I will gasho, I will salute you, and we will end right there. So please end with a few of these beautiful koans written by Westerners in this day and time just a few years ago. Keep that in mind. Feet kissing earth echo heartbeat. Dark trees dripping liquid sky. Clear air shimmering silver birdsong. Dawn walk to Butsudan. Lone bird sings light's arrival. Dark, hoary branch arcs skyward. Voiceless voice chants ancient scriptures. Each God's finger pointing the way. Fir tree sheds ripe cones, yet few sprout in fertile soil. Buddha tills our minds. Can't we grow even one seed? This one's entitled Buddha's Birthday. When was he born? Sometime before Jesus and after Krishna. Or is it the other way around? Confusing, trying to date the eternal. Spring lilies in an earthen pot, sun's radiance captured. Fog blankets mountainside. River flows freely by. Reeds narrow, descending to Wind River. Sky opens wide. The gate is shut, the mind is empty. Breathless air of heights. Narrow winding road. Glowing rock marks destination. Now close the door and shut the gate. Golden trees march slowly up shallow hillside. Barbed wire cuts sharply into old stumps long dead. No trespassing, no trespassing, says the signs. But I am everywhere already. Gashol.